I was about to say, a lot of people have said to me, both personally and kind of professionally, how mature you are for a 16, 17-year-old and how well you speak, but also how well you run and manage those situations. So, in terms of processing, kind of becoming a UK champion and booking your ticket to the Olympics, how did that go in your head? Because you just alluded to the fact that kind of mentally at the time it was a bit of a struggle. Was it just the pressure of, UK championships and literally what was on the line?
Yeah, I would say that was definitely when I was struggling the most mentally throughout this season because once I actually secured my place into the Olympics, I felt a lot less stressed because I felt I was kind of going into the games as an underdog. Whereas when I was going into the UK champs, people were watching me to see if I would make the team, which is a lot of stress. And I found that journaling and just finding an outlet for my feelings during that time was the best coping strategy. Which I'll definitely take into seasons in the future. But I would say that for me, when I became the UK champs, yes, there was more media coverage, but I felt like it was less pressuring media coverage because again, I
Yeah.
wasn't one of the fastest going into the Olympics. Nobody expected me to go out there with a medal. It was literally just an experience, see how I'd cope in that stadium and that atmosphere. And I'm very grateful to be in that position and going into the games. And hopefully come LA, I'll be in a different position where maybe people are expecting more from me. But yeah, I thought I was in a good place going into the Olympics.
And just before touching on Paris, I just wanted to mention the psychological stuff. I listened to the bits of the podcast that you did with Matt the other day as well, and you mentioned the psychological stuff that you'd done with Deborah and around a pie chart as well. Could you explain
Mm-hmm.
some of the ways that you've actually kind of worked on that the mental side?
Yeah, so the pie chart is a big one, and we actually developed that when I was about 12 or 13, and I was struggling with cross country races because I was constantly dropping out of cross country races because I felt like I couldn't do it. And I was really struggling because I felt like every race was the end of the world. But Deborah really helped me put it into perspective because she was like, I want you to draw everything that's important to you and allocate it to a percentage in the pie chart. And you can see that running is just a hobby. It's not the be all end all. It's you do it for fun. So if a race goes badly, it's not the end of the world. You'll move on. There's so many more important aspects to life, like family and friends and just all the social parts of life, that running, if you look at it, you're not just an athlete. My whole being, I'm Phoebe. I'm not Phoebe the athlete. So trying to get to grasp with that was something that was really useful for me going into the next season because I could finally, you know, look at it from a different perspective and be like, okay, if I don't make it to the Olympics, it's not the end of the world. I will move on and there'll be different times and different opportunities, which is the benefit of being my age because there will be more races. So that's something that I'm very glad that I was in this position this summer because now I've learned so much that I can carry with me throughout my athletics career.
And actually, I mean, it's a question for a lot of athletes, and I think people do wonder what kind of goes through your head in a race itself. I know every race is different, but and I know the 800 meters is incredibly tactical. But
Mm.
what's going through your head when you are up against these other amazing women on the track?
Yeah, so I would say that it depends what race it is. Sometimes if I'm just running for a time, like in BMC races, I'm literally just singing a song in my head. Like I'm not even thinking about the race. Sometimes I'll look at the clock through the 400 and be like, okay, that's that time. We can maybe estimate what my next 400 lap would be. But I would say in the British champs, it was completely different. I was constantly thinking of my positioning and I was worried because as people know, I like to go off fast and sometimes I can go off too fast and not have anything left. So I was very aware of that in my head whilst I was running the British champs final. I was like, okay, you're leading, but it's still 59 through the first lap. You can still have a sprint finish. And I just was so focusing on not having a repeat of what happened in a BMC race in Manchester where I ran 54 for the first lap and just couldn't continue in the
Yeah.
last 100. So that was what was going through my head in the British Champs final.
Well, you still won that race, to be fair. So, in that
Yeah.
sense, just going on to Paris, then. I mean, for any teenager, and there are tales of many British teenagers going to the Olympics through different generations. In the build up to Paris, itself, was it almost, I think you alluded to it earlier, that you weren't really, I mean, no one was expecting a medal, kind of given the age and the circumstances. Was it almost like a nothing to lose attitude going into it?
Definitely. I think the most nervous I was about going into Paris was how I would react under the pressures that is stadium running. I'd never ran in a full stadium before. My biggest race before the Olympics was British Champs, which does not compare to the audience and the atmosphere of the Olympics. So once I had kind of come to grips with that and getting through the first round in the Paris Olympics, I was just that was where I kind of felt like, okay, I've done everything that I wanted to now. I've managed to complete this race, got a place in the semis without freaking out about the atmosphere. And that was the main pressure for me going into the Olympics. I didn't care about, getting to the finals or getting a medal or anything or getting a PB. I was just fixated on that. And for me, that was a lot better than being fixated on getting a medal, because that was my mindset going into the UK Championships, because it was more reachable for me, and that was a hard position to be in. So in
Yeah.
Paris, I was in a lot better of a mindset.
And you were quite open about the mental side of that semi-final as well. Could you open
Mm,
up more about that experience, the call room, walking out into the arena and
mm.
just being in front of 85,000 people? Because I mean, I was there, as well and you could get an idea of how loud it was. I mean, it was
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah, I mean, that feeling of walking out of the curtains in the first round is something that I literally you just have to be there. It's just such an indescribable thing. I remember walking out of the cool room. I've said this story many times, but walking out of the cool room underneath the stadium, there was like a door that was slightly open, and through the door I could see just crowds of people all stacked up. And I was like, how am I going to run in front of all of these people? It's just something that you just can't describe to anyone unless they've been there. And so I was just constantly trying not to freak out. And I was on the start line of the heats, literally tearing up when I saw my face on the big screen, because I was just so overwhelmed and also very proud of myself. But I just kept thinking, how am I about to run this race in front of all these people, in front of all these different amazing athletes? And after the semi-finals, when I didn't get through, I think an accumulation of everything I just felt throughout the season and throughout Paris kind of hit me all at once. And I literally broke down into tears because I was so overwhelmed, and I couldn't believe that my journey was over, because I knew I wouldn't do a race after the Olympics. So that my season ended with that, and I just couldn't believe that everything had happened. And I was bawling in all my media interviews after that. And it's just I was very proud of myself in that moment for being able to cope with that, and just kind of taking in the atmosphere after the different races, because before you go into the start line you're kind of blocking everything out. You don't want to
Yeah.
focus on the noise, you don't want to focus on the people, but after the race you can take everything in, and it's just such an incredible feeling.
Was it what you expected? I guess people will, I don't know if you had dreams about this, but I guess people will visualize about kind of what they expect for a big event, whether that's an Olympics, World Championships, World Cup in football, etc. Was it what you expected when you were there in terms of the village and the surroundings kind of around Paris generally, and then actually racing in the Stade de France?
It's funny because the Olympics is literally the pinnacle of athletics, but I just still couldn't comprehend how big it actually is. Like driving through Paris, Paris is decorated with a ton of Olympic decorations and banners, and going into the Olympic Village, it's just a city, like it's massive. Each country has their own building, and the atmosphere is completely crazy. And it's easy to get exhausted before your race from taking in everything and exploring the village. So nothing could prepare me for that, for how big of an event this actually is. Like I kind of forgot that it is international television. Everyone watches this. And it's just something that I would say that I couldn't really prepare myself for. Like even speaking to athletes about it, it's hard to put into words how it is walking out into the arena. And of the build up before, and it's so exhausting. Like I literally I could have done under 20 worlds afterwards, but I was so tired. I don't know how
Yeah.
people continue racing afterwards, because it is such an draining thing mentally and physically after the Olympics, because of how overwhelming everything is. So for me, leaving my season at the Olympics was the best thing for me.
And obviously with Keely getting the gold in the eight, Georgia the bronze in the 15. What do you make of the strength in depth, the British middle distance running right now? Because I mean, you must look at that and go, wow, I'm in an era
Yeah.
where, that must drive you on.
It's amazing, and these people have been such inspiration, especially Keely. She's been such an inspiration of mine since as long as I can remember starting running. And it was so weird running against I was never in the same race as her, but just being in like kind of the same category as her and in the same competition as her is really crazy to think about. And that's actually something that I had to get to grips with this year, the fact that these people that are my idols are now technically my competitors, but I still view them as idols. Like I was still screaming when Keely got the gold medal at Team GB House. And it's amazing how far middle distance athletics in Britain has come. I would say it's probably our strongest area of athletics, definitely. It's always been a very prestigious sport in this country, but right now it's just a crazy, Keely getting the gold and George getting the bronze, as you say. And it's weird that I'm in this division now and I'm going to have to try and compete with these idols in the future, but it's something that I'm very ready for. And I'm very proud to be representing Britain in this event.